Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters. We all know transitioning out of the military is more than just a career shift. It's a full-scale identity change, as most of us has found out. For many of us, the habits, mindset, and purpose we carried in uniform don't automatically translate into life after service. Today, we have the perfect guest to help unpack that journey. Someone who's not only lived it, but has dedicated her second career to guiding others through it. Mary Polanco retired as a Chief Master Sergeant after 23 years in the Air Force, where she led at the highest enlisted levels, including as the Senior Enlisted Advisor for the Air Force Resilience Directorate. That's a mouthful. But at what should have been the pinnacle of her career, she found herself grappling with clinical depression and anxiety, an experience that reshaped her entire perspective on leadership, resilience, and personal growth. Now, as the founder and CEO of Live and Lead Well LLC, a two-time business owner and a doctoral student in leadership psychology, she's helping veterans and leaders alike navigate transformation with purpose. She's also the author of Your Final Debrief, a must-read for anyone preparing to leave the service and facing the emotional, psychological challenges that come with it. Mary's journey is one of rediscovery, resilience, and redefining success beyond the uniform. Today, she's here to share her hard-earned lessons on navigating the transition, rebuilding with intention, and embracing the next chapter of your life on your own terms. Mary, welcome to the show.
What a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Also, what an intro. I'm honored.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just information you gave me, so
Yeah.
it's all you. You know, I've been really excited for this one. A mutual friend of both of ours, Thomas McKenzie, put me on to you and said that you are one of the most powerful guests that I should bring on this show to talk about transition. So we've waited probably a few months at this point to do this because I'm a go-getter and I had so much content that, it just happens that way. So I'm excited to do this with you and to let all this valuable content live for our audience out there, our brothers and sisters. So let's just jump right in. Where did you grow up and what inspired you to join the Air Force?
I grew up in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania. And I am the youngest of 8 kids. No one in my sibling family has been in the military, but my dad was in the Navy for 23 years, although he retired about 8 years before I was even born. So I didn't live that life. I was going to college. I thought, I don't know what I want to do, but why not knock out some courses? And then I was at work one day as a waitress, and the hostess there told me she was joining the military, joining the Air Force, asked me if I wanted to go meet the recruiter. I said, absolutely not. Are you insane? That's a crazy suggestion. Somehow she got me to the recruiter's office. And just after kind of doing some reflection, I figured I don't really know what I want to do with my life, so I might as well go travel and learn a trade while I figure it out. And then that's what got me in. And then I just kind of forgot to get out and started pursuing a lot of different jobs while I served, which kept me going for the whole 23. And so yeah, that's a little bit about why I kind of took the leap in.
So why the Air Force? Just because you had the friend who was like, let's go talk to the recruiter? Or were you just smart enough, smarter than all of us who joined the other branches?
So little column A, little column B.
Yeah.
This is the honest to goodness truth, and it's a vulnerable answer. 18 years old, didn't know anything, very sheltered life. I said, which one has the easiest boot camp? So they were like, Air Force. I was like, that sounds good to me. Let's do it.
I mean, good for you. My recommendation to people now, no matter what, I love the Army, but I watched my sister and my brother-in-law's careers in the Air Force and always on leave. Just it's endless time off, it seemed. Always treated like adults, not treated like children. Don't know what formations really even are. I saw that when I was medevac through Ramstein on my second or third deployment. The Air Force guys were the ones bitching about having to do 3 formations a day for accountability. Yeah. It's like, we don't do this in the Air Force. Like, we play by big boy rules. And so that truly is my advice. I always tell people, go to college, ROTC or something, become an officer because your options are better. You get paid more, obviously. Just I saw it in the Army, officers leaving in the middle of deployment to go to their next assignment. Meanwhile, I'm getting stop lost and orders deleted to go on a 3rd deployment instead of seeing another part of the Army. So that is my advice. That's why I say you were smarter than we are, because the Air Force really does it seems to me overall, particularly, and I'd be curious to get your kind of feedback on this. As I continue to do this work with transitioning veterans, it seems to me the Air Force better prepares people to get out than the other branches. I'm not saying that it's not without its failures in that area. It just seems like you Air Force, personnel have it figured out better than any of the other branches.
That's interesting. That's not my experience, but that's because my exposure is to primarily Air Force, and we're all struggling in the same way. So I don't have the basis of comparison really for, the pool of non-Air Force folks. So that's interesting to hear that. Also, I think we all have kind of, I don't think there's stigmas, but like perceptions, ideas of other services without having been in them. We kind of make up what we see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I do agree on one thing. The quality of life for Air Force is different. I can say that because I spent 2 months with the Marine Corps for my senior NCO academy, and that was sort of my Air Force appreciation tour. And I really saw a big difference in the way we treat and the way that, living conditions and things like that. So that I will attest to personally.
Well, and I kind of have a similar personal anecdote to add to that. My sister was a weather officer for the Air Force. So when she was in Hawaii, she got attached to an infantry unit from the 25th. And I remember her distinctly, like, I don't know how you do this. This is terrible. Why I'm attached to an infantry unit and this is what your life is like every single day. I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, it's what I know. And she's like, this is miserable. This is not how we do things in the Air Force. So, just hearing her experience with quality of life was enough to tell me that, the Air Force is probably a little bit better. Plus, again, I agree with you. We do shape our vision of other services, but like being an NTC or JRTC with, TACPs or whatever attached to us from the Air Force, they're living in hotels off post while we're living in the cantonment area or in the box. They're going home every night. And I'm like, man, this kind of bullshit. Like, this isn't fair. So it's true. When you filled out my form, you mentioned that joining the military was one of the most pivotal moments of your life. Why was that? What was so pivotal about it for you?
I think because I am the youngest of so many siblings, it was one way that I felt like I can kind of go make my own path. Everywhere we went in the town, oh, you're a Nelson. You look like a Nelson. You're so-and-so's sister. I felt sort of compelled to step out and do something completely different. I was very adventurous at 18 to be able to make this decision and leave home. And so I feel that moment of just making a decision for myself was truly empowering. To set out to the unknown. This is the first time I was on a plane. Just like really go out and just figure out what this thing is. Now, truth be told, the first night I cried myself to sleep in basic training and said, what did I do? But we got through it. And yeah, I mean, it was just pivotal because it was the first real big decision I ever made for myself.
Yeah, I think at the deepest level for all of us who've joined, I think that's probably the truth, right? Like, I joined at 17, spent a year on delayed entry, didn't really know what I was getting myself into, got the wake up call, towing the line, at 30th AG at Fort Benning. So, yeah, for sure. You mentioned earlier, over 23 years, you had a lot of different jobs. So you collected a lot of experience in the Air Force, which culminated in you being the senior enlisted advisor for the Air Force Resilience Directorate. What all did you do to land that posting in the Air Force? And what was your original job when you came in the Air Force? I talked to a lot of Air Force people who wanted to be a pilot. Most of them wanted to be pilots, and it just didn't work out for them, or they did end up being pilots. What was your thing?
Yeah, security forces, huh? First, can you believe it? Is that shocking?
No, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty common MOS in the Air Force, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I took the ASVAB Air Force test and I went to go to MEPS to pick out my job. And the gentleman was like, hey, here's some jobs you're qualified for. I think they have to show you security forces first because they need to fill it. And he showed me that first job and I was like, yep, sounds good, whatever. And he was like, well, you scored really high in like administrative and grammar. And do you want to look at some other office jobs? I was like, no, I don't want to be stuck in a desk all day. So I knew nothing. All right. And so, yeah, I was kind of stuck at a gate and in a truck all day, but that's okay. So that was my first gig. And I will be completely honest with you, I would not have it any other way. That first role really shaped me in understanding, first of all, so many things, but understanding the type of discipline it takes for certain jobs and having an appreciation for that, even though it didn't fit my temperament. And I excelled. I was able to excel there. And the quickest time, the first time they told me you can get out, I applied to go get another job because it wasn't for me. But I would never do it different. And I think that was an important piece. But then, so I went from that, went to optometry, which is a small clinic in, your hospitals where you get your glasses.
That's a hell of a change.
It's one hell of a change.
That's a hell of a change.
When I showed up to my first assignment in the medical world, culture shock.
Big time, I'm sure.
Complete culture shock. First of all, I was a senior airman, E4. They introduced the E6 technical sergeant to me by her first name. I said, I'm sorry, who now? So yeah, complete culture shock. And so what I found interesting about that role shift was my ability to take what I loved about being a cop and security forces and bring it into this, but then also have the flexibility and freedom to kind of be a little bit more myself. So I thought that was a lot of fun. So I did that for 10 years, actually, moved around the world quite a bit. And then I applied to be a instructor for professional military education. So in the Air Force, it's Airman Leadership School and the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. I know there's equivalents in the other services as well. So I did that out in Hawaii, my hardship tour for 4 years.
That's
and
tough.
It was so
tough.
So difficult. But, just like being in the Air Force, if you're talking to someone from another service, shut up, quit complaining, you have it so good. When you live in Hawaii, you cannot call back to Pennsylvania and say anything but wonderful things because no one wants to hear it. Like, go sit on the beach with your Mai Tai, Mary, and shut up. So I did that for 4 years. And that was really what kind of solidified my passion for people and leadership. And understanding all of those dynamics and complexities, I became fascinated. So that's where I finished my bachelor's in leadership, later on to go finish my master's in leadership. And so that was like a very important piece of my career.
I was gonna say, isn't it funny how people who are just natural leaders are drawn to educating other leaders? You just end up in a spot like that, right? Like, I never considered myself a good leader. However, still mentor kids that are in. I was just at a drill school graduation 2 weeks ago for one of my mentees, and that posted really well. A lot of people realized that, and then it's been pointed out to me. I'm doing the same thing now. Like, I'm still leading again, and like, that's not what I just set out to kind of help and make a difference. You know what I mean? But that is leadership, right? Like, it takes a lot to put yourself out here, as particularly the way that we talked about this offline, the way that I do it, right? Like, with no give a fuck whatsoever. I don't care about an algorithm. I'm going to speak your language because I come from that world. And so, I think it's fascinating that you end up teaching at the leadership schools, and that's really how you discovered your passion. I think it's just because you had that hidden talent within you. You just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, I agree. And it really is. It's so interesting teaching leadership concepts to children. Like, I remember going through my master's program, and my daughter, who was probably about 10 at the time, she was like, Mommy, is that even a real job? Like, what are you doing? I was like, huh. And then, like, now she's 15 and she wants to study sociology and leadership and all this. So it's really interesting. But yeah, so I mean, to answer your original question of like, what did I do to get the particular job I ended my career at? It was, I believe, a combination of putting myself out there to try things that I didn't have a clue about and that I could grow from, instead of staying pipeline, we call it, into one job my entire career. I really stepped out because after being in Hawaii for that job, I came back to be a superintendent. So I got experience leading large groups of people. Then I went to work on the Hill as an enlisted fellow, where I was a staffer for a year for a senator. And I was separated from the Air Force, not administratively, but physically. And I really was uncomfortable in that job, but I learned a ton. And so I think it's just really giving yourself breath and take advantage of all of the things that are offered to you as much as you possibly can. That's what I did.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you reach a turning point in your career where you start facing clinical depression and anxiety. At what point in your career did these start to come up? And I'm only curious because I feel like it's probably towards the end of your career that this really started to come up and you're starting to face the transition, correct?
Yes. So this is a two-part answer. And the reason is because there's the when did I realize it in the then, and when do I know it happened now
Right.
as I
Yeah,
look
of
back,
course. Right.
right?
Hindsight's always 2020, and
Oh my,
we end up with this ability. I get kind of chastised for this often because I'm 10 years on the other side of my transition at this point. You know what I mean? And so I kind of forget. I have to go back and look at some of those steps that I took, and like particularly as I'm now writing a book because so many of you have pushed me to do that, right? Like tell my transition story and lessons learned each step of the way along the transition from literally November 2nd, 2015, when I got out, is the day that the book starts. And I'll take it all the way till whatever I'm doing when I finish writing the book. But it's really been cathartic, and like I didn't realize a lot of things that I realize now, and so it helps me tailor the messaging to be able to reach our target, our brothers and sisters with where they're at, because it's so important for me doing this work to take that step back and meet people where they're at in their journey. And it's really hard to do when you haven't gone back and looked at your own transition. You just are on the other side of it, speaking from that position. So I agree with what you're saying.
yeah, and what you're saying too is like when you haven't done that inner reflective work, you're basically just helping someone administratively. Which is great. We need that advice. Trust me, I absolutely, I just warn people this book isn't about administrative. Please do not ask me about VA claims. I am here to tell you how to do this,
Yeah, here, because this is the most important part, right?
It is. It is. Absolutely it is. So yeah, I think so as I look back and I realized through therapy and healing, I actually had signs and symptoms of anxiety when I was at 12, 13, 14 years. I normalized getting out a good cry once a week, most of the time with a trusted boss if I had one. A lot of times it was alone, sometimes it was in the line of at a grocery store, like, but it was normal to me because I was just overly stressed and I thought, "Oh, if I can just release that." Some people do it in different ways. Mine was tears. And so I think those were the start. That was the start of me realizing like, is this normal? It was for me, and I pushed forward. And then fast forward 7 years, it was when I got the job on the Hill. And here's why. Because up until the Hill, let me just set the stage real quick. When you're an enlisted fellow, you are separated from the military lifestyle. You are one person. You have to worry about getting yourself up in the morning, getting dressed, getting on the metro, getting there, whatever, right? That's it. You are learning something at the lowest level. You're brand new. Okay. But when I was a superintendent, I had all of these distractions. I had an airman to help here, a problem to solve there, all this stimulation to keep me going. Well, when all that stopped and I went on the Hill and it was just me, it got real uncomfortable. And I
Mhm.
was reaching out for things to like fill this discomfort so that I didn't have to face what I had suppressed for probably 10 years. And so, and I made my best attempts. Trust me. I started a hugely unsuccessful business at that time. I tried to volunteer for this or do that, but I didn't have the capacity to fill that void. And so it all bubbled up to the surface. And that's where actual physical manifestation of anxiety and depression hit me. And so it got really bad. I was just put on E9 chief. So I knew I had 3 years ahead of me. And I had just gotten the job at the Pentagon. So I'm a brand new chief in a high level position and I can barely breathe. I hit it for a few months and then I just had to have an honest conversation with my boss and my team. And I have to tell you, it was not lost on me that I was the Air Force's senior enlisted leader in resilience at this time. And I think that was probably the greatest gift ever given to me because it really compelled me to be some sort of an example. And so that's when I reached out and asked for help, which was the hardest thing I think I did during my revelation there of realizing I couldn't do it on my own because I was a high performer. I was I was the go-to person. I was the fast burner and all that other crap we use. Um, and why couldn't I figure this out on my own? I was so struggling. And so when I just kind of conceded to that and reached out for help, that changed everything for me. So
Well,
yeah,
and it's so funny that you talk about going to the hill. That's almost foreshadowing of what your transition is going to be like.
bingo.
Right. And the epiphany that I just had while we're recording this right now, for those that are listening or watching, like seriously, the way she described that, it's like, oh, that's the same thing that happens when you transition out. I didn't have an experience like that, so I would never put two and two together like that. But you just said literally everything that happened to me when I got med boarded out of the Army at 12 and a half years instead of the 22 I was supposed to go to, and man, that's a brilliant way of putting it. It's like you are completely separated from what you know your whole adult life. And now you're expected to go be this high performer on the hill at this low level job where you had all these distractions before that you don't have anymore. It's the exact same as transitioning out. And so let's move into your transition. You describe your own transition as a deconditioning process. What do you mean by that?
I mean that for 2 decades, I was fed how I should think, how I should feel about things, my values I should have, and I bought into it completely, and I ran their race. And at the end of that, when I made the decision, which was probably my first realization of autonomy and agency over my own life by making the decision to retire when I did. But when I made that decision, I realized that these voices and this narrative kept creeping in. I'm on terminal leave and I just can't sit still. Like I'm supposed to be relaxing. There was a honeymoon phase, sure, but after 2 months of chilling, I was like, you got to get doing something productive. Like you got to use those skills. You have to do this. People are expecting things of you. And then I stopped one day and I was like, why?
Yeah.
Like, what is this internal dialogue? And that's what I tell transitioning service members is always ask the question, where does this originate? And so when I started peeling back that onion, I was like, oh, because you system Air Force would never let me rest. You convinced me that if I throttled back for even a month, that it would hurt my performance and it would hurt my promotion eligibility and it would hurt my leadership credibility. And so I never stopped. And when you are on that kind of belt, that kind of conveyor belt for that long, you don't even realize these voices in your head aren't even you.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk about that because I did the same thing. 17 to 30, right? 17 to 30 years old, I played their game. I ran, like you said, ran their race. I never had a chance to really figure out who I was outside of that because, at 17 in a delayed entry program, they're preconditioning you, like you said, right? You're living at home with mom and dad, and you have a high school telling you what you're supposed to do and how to think. There was less than 30 days between graduating high school and I was at 30th AG at Fort Benning. So, I mean, for me, it was incredibly hard. And again, I don't know how it was for you. I assume as a senior enlisted chief in the Air Force, they probably used you till the last minute. They probably didn't give you the time to transition the 365 days that the reg says that we're supposed to have. It was the same thing for me in a med board. I was just moved all over the place so they could bring in another senior staff sergeant to take over a platoon because I was an MTO slot that can't do anything anymore. So they just kick you to the curb and find random things for you to do and still are in your ear about you should be doing this or you should be doing that. Never did anybody tell me you should be preparing to get out. You should be thinking about your future. What are you going to do when you get out? None of that even ever crossed my mind because I was so busy still trying to figure out how can I give back to the Army while I know that they're done with me. And it's like, that doesn't make any damn sense because I logically know my career is over, yet I'm not doing anything to prepare myself on the other side of it.
Well, there's such a hold on us psychologically that we've attached how we show up in that last 365 days is going to define who we are as people. And that is false. And that is what you and I are trying to let people know. Your transition, really, it's different for everyone, but it's the start of the moment you decide I'm going to do something different. So I'm going to separate or I'm going to retire. That moment means you got to start transitioning mentally and emotionally too, because you deserve that 365 days to work through what you need to. But you're going to come up against a whole lot of opinions and a lot of side eye and people saying your road, retired on active duty, and all of this nonsense, right? And I talk about that at length in my book about how I mislabeled people so often because I didn't understand their experience. As a transitioning service member, you have to understand it is not their job to understand your experience, it is yours. And so you have to let go of all those voices and realize that you are embarking on something new, something challenging, and you deserve all of the mental space to do that. So what I did in my you made a good assumption that most E9s, most high level senior leaders probably won't get the time they need to transition, but I will counter with most of them don't take it.
For sure. No,
And
definitely. Yeah.
right.
But it's through that internal monologue that's been programmed into us our
Mhm.
whole careers that we don't take it. Like
That's right.
I'm not sitting here saying that all you E9s, even myself as an E6, I was just as conditioned as you guys were. Like I'm just as guilty of not taking the opportunity that was put in front of me. Did I have more than enough time in the med board over 18 months to figure some shit out? Yes, absolutely. But to your point, what we're kind of talking about here is letting go of those voices. They're going to say the worst fucking things they can about you. They're going to call you a shitbag. They're going to tell you got the itis. They're going to tell you you're a terrible leader. Your NCOERs are going to reflect because now you're in a med board. And it's really hard as somebody who did care, to not let that stuff affect you and shape kind of the things and the actions that you're taking to prepare yourself to get out. And so I think to your point, you have to don't give a fuck about what they say about you the minute you start your transition as a service member out of the military, because I'm here living proof a decade after I transitioned out with an E7 who looks at me as a father figure because I've helped him so much in his career, who is still asking me to come pin him. And like all those other people that told me I was a shitty leader and all of that, like, well, here's the thing. There's like 4 or 5 guys out there that call me on a regular basis for career advice. I couldn't have been that shitty of a leader.
No, you just didn't. You weren't in their mold anymore. Like people who are still in it don't get it. And that's what I mean by it's not their responsibility to understand your transition. So therefore, you should just let them be who they are. Also, there's a lot of projection happening from folks who are quote unquote stuck and you're leaving. And they haven't acknowledged that yet. I remember one time I was at my last conference and I had, I was retiring and going on terminal leave in like 4 and 5 months. And I ran into an old colleague who was also at the same rank as me. And he was like, oh, so what do you got going on next? It's always the next. Can I just sidebar on that for a second? It's always the next. What are you doing next? It's like, I just got in my job a week ago. Can I breathe, please? Anyway, okay, I digress. I digress. But so anyway, he's like, what do you got going on next? I was like, I don't know, day drinking on my deck. I have no plans. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, I'm retiring. And he goes, how long have you been in? I said, 23 years. And he goes, isn't that a little early? And I looked at the watch that I didn't have on and I said, I signed up for 4 years.
Right.
And I think I met my quota.
19 years over.
Like, I mean, what kind of response was that? But so I responded in the way that I was grateful that I did it because I was confident in my decisions. Had I not been, that would have shook me. Like, oh God, a peer thinks I'm dirtbag, all that. No, that was one. Number 2, I walked away and I was like, God, that was such a projection. He's not judging me as much as he is maybe questioning his own path.
For sure.
Right?
Well, because he probably has the same amount of time in or more than you do. He's coming up close to, I'm sure it's still the same way. 30 years for an enlisted member, that's it. That's all you're getting, period, end of story. Unless you hold like some super stupid high billet at like, the hill level or something like that. But it is projection, because here's the deal. I don't care if you're doing 2 years or you're doing 30 years, your time is going to end. It's going to end. And the Army and the Air Force and Marine Corps and Navy and even the Coast Guard and Space Force are going to roll along right without you and not miss a beat. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because they make you feel like you're such an integral part to the mission and everything else your entire career. Like, if you, like you said earlier, if you take a month off, you're going to set everything back so much and we can't function without you. That's what they put into your head.
Yep, it is. And it's man, is it just mess with you? Because when it comes time to leave, when you think I'm such an integral part of this, how could I let them down by leaving if I'm grappling with separating or retiring, quote unquote, early? Yeah, you are left with a lot of, because here's the thing, the truth is you spent however many years, 4 to 30, living their mission and vision for them, and you have attached your personal identity to it. And so who are you without fill in the blank? Like for me, it was, who was I if I wasn't trying to help somebody, save the day, put on my cape and go have an
Put out the
airman come
fires.
to
Yeah.
put out the fires. Like, who was I if I wasn't that person with the to-do list that was ever running? Like, and so that's my identity. And so when there's the prospect of that going away, whether it be taken or by choice, it's no different. You still have to reclaim your actual identity.
Well, and for us coming in so young, we never had a chance to develop that identity. So it was developed for us. So I think we're even at more of a disadvantage, because later in life, I don't really, I mean, you study psychology, you're in a doctorate program. So I know that there's science behind this, but our brains develop, even at 26, our frontal lobe's still not fully formed, right? Like usually 26 is like that age, I think. And shit, 26 years old, I was already 10 years into a career almost. Like 10 years of them building this identity for me from 17 to 26, 9 years. That's a long time to have that identity prescribed to you.
Yeah, and I think we need to be aware and understand, like, I think it goes without saying that there, just like anything in life, there's the good and the bad. I am who I am today because I served for 23 years. Like, there's no taking that away. I have zero regrets, right? But on that note, I think it's also important for people to realize how the system is set up to get the max performance out of someone. I didn't say to create the best person. To get the max performance out of you. And I think that's a really important, you're absolutely right. The science is real. The dopamine that we were chasing to make sure, when I got that first Atta Girl, like, here's your first award, you're incredible. Do you think for a second I was tempted to throttle back? Absolutely not. That dopamine hit was so good. It was like, wow, I am good enough. I left home and here I am making my way, and I'm, making staff first time, and I'm doing all these things and people love me. Then I was chasing that for the rest of my career. The problem was that it got less and less effective, because all the while I had put on the back burner my actual desires that I didn't even know about.
Well,
right?
it's even amplified too, because it's such a public forum. There's an award ceremony, and you're one of 5 people standing in front of a formation of 1,000 people that are getting this recognition, right? And I didn't particularly care about the awards. I wasn't chasing the awards. It was my goal to take care of the soldiers under me. And I was pretty well known for doing that. I'd sacrifice a lot to do that. So much so that, my soldiers, after a large field problem, forced me to go get checked out for some serious medical stuff, right? Like, that's the kind of leader that I tried to be. I wasn't chasing awards, but you're right. It is a huge dopamine hit, because when you stand out from the crowd, it's pretty easy to tell. You make rank faster because you got more points, because you got more awards, and your name is floating around a battalion somewhere, and people know who you are. And, and then there's 999 other people that don't. They don't know who you are.
No. Exactly. I look back and I'm very grateful that I was able to maintain my integrity along that pathway and not chase, quote unquote, which I have no judgment towards anyone who's just trying to survive, right? Like if that's your way to survive, I no judgment to you. I was able to maintain my authenticity, I should say, with, being there for people and whatnot. But Adam, be honest, when someone would come up to you after you help them and be like, thank you so much. I don't know how I would do it without you. Like you truly have changed my life. Dopamine.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I still get it to this day doing the work
Exactly.
that I do. It's more
Yeah.
meaningful to me now.
It absolutely is, right? So there's something that keeps us going that we find, and that we and the thing is, I truly believe this. Our role here is to find out what our gifts and talents are, and then serve others with that. Like yeah, I could that is completely so just because I don't have a uniform and I don't serve my country anymore does not mean I'm not serving my community. Like I believe in service. I believe it's the way for us to feel connected, to be in community, to release other hormones like oxytocin where we feel connected and the love hormone, if you will. And so I truly believe that that's the case. I'm not saying transition out and never talk to anybody again. That's not
No, you're going to
that's
have a
not how,
rough time if you do it that
yeah.
way. What were the biggest things that you struggled with, right? So through over 100 episodes of this show now, starting with the idea that the path back to purpose was through entrepreneurship, noticing that a big part of my transition was that loss of purpose. I'm sure everything that you've said here identifies that as well. And then really getting into the early episodes of this, realizing the issue was in the transition and how the TAP class is structured, how it's really a blanket fix for an individual problem. We need to revamp the whole thing, all of that. Did you struggle with purpose? I know you struggled with identity because we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. Networking, that's a big one. A lot of people don't branch out outside of the military and start building a network. And I used to think too, the whole cliche, your network is your net worth, is a lot of bullshit until I started building a powerful network. And now I'm like, oh, with a network comes unprecedented opportunity. And that's the coolest part about building relationships with people, I think. And so did you struggle with all those things as well?
Oh yeah. I think and we're talking transition, right? Because the actually leaving, because the first difficult thing I struggled with that got me to my transition, that set me on the pathway was releasing other people's expectations of me. That was the first bit. So now I'm in transition. I think the biggest struggle I had was, am I going to find meaningful work? Am I going to be able to find something that excites me, that supports me financially, but that I don't have to feel trapped again? That was probably my biggest concern, and biggest struggle. I also think one of the biggest difficulties I had during transition was just shutting up and like being quiet and allowing me to be. That's a real struggle for someone who is constantly on the move because it seems counterproductive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would I sit here in silence for 5 minutes and relax and rest when I could actually have knocked out 2 or 3 things on my to-do list?
I'm the same way. I'm the
But
same exact way.
right? I mean, like that's all of us.
Yeah. But I
That's
mean,
speaking to all of us.
even to this day, I'm that way. If I'm not actively engaged in
Yeah.
something that moves the needle, I feel guilt and I beat myself up. However, I've gotten a way better control over that now, and I do allow myself to sit with that now because it is important to just block out the noise, right? And just it's okay to take a breath. You do not have to go 100 miles an hour 24/7.
I want to go one step further and say, based on my studies and all that I've been reading, it's not just okay. It's like we say it's okay because I think we want people to feel comforted. It's necessary.
Yes. Yes.
It is necessary. Like, I want to take it away from you just feeling like I support you in this. And I say, you should be doing this. And I don't do that a lot, Adam. I am like, everybody do what feels right. That's me. But this is one thing that if you want to change for good, just start or end your day in silence and allow all of that noise, all the noise to slowly come down. you will be turning down the volume on society, your family, your military service, and you will just be able to be. And it's good for your brain health. It's a necessary step for your brain health, is to just sit in silence. And they call it mindfulness. Mindfulness is a understanding that you're thinking about how you're feeling and being without judgment. Without judgment, that's important. And then also just allowing yourself to, again, just
feel. To
just
feel.
feel.
Yes. And that, again, is something else I think is absolutely necessary. You mentioned it earlier. You were crying once a week, wherever that would be. I'm huge into plants and plant medicine. It's largely what healed me on my journey. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I got, was allowing yourself to sit with those emotions, to feel those, and to go ahead and cry if you need to cry, or beat the pillow, or if you need to beat the pillow. Or some people don't let themselves laugh. I was one of those people. Now, like, it's nothing for me to go watch a stand-up comedy and just get a couple of hours of laughter in, because it's so important, and I don't know why we end up like this, because at least my experience was the Army. They teach you how to shut off all those emotions, particularly as an infantry guy, to be able to go and do what I need to do as my job, right?
Yeah. And we're not totally unique in that way in the service, because in corporate world, also, it's the leave your emotions at the door. I don't think so. We are made of emotions. Like, why am I leaving me at the door when that's the best part of me, But in the military, especially being a woman, I will be 100% honest about that. Being a woman in security forces, where I am completely outnumbered, I took an extra step in masking myself and dialing it down. And listen, I discovered a hobby at about 7-8 years in, where it was crafting related. Now that's one of my businesses. But at the time, I hid it. I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell anybody that I made greeting cards, for fear of being labeled domestic and not taken serious as a leader, when hiding something that truly was a part of me, and artistic creative side. When I discovered that it was important for me to share that, it blew open my leadership credibility, because people are like, oh, look she's a serious military leader, and she's crafty, and she takes care of her people, and she brings in, homemade muffins for birthdays, and holistic me, right? And I think when we are told to suppress parts of ourselves, then we're actually, the military suffers, because they're not getting the best parts of us, for sure. We don't feel safe psychologically. And then we're just not bringing our whole selves to work. And that's a problem. So I think that's a big systemic issue across the globe. Is
Absolutely. And so you found your way through transition through entrepreneurship. Good for you, because I think more of us should do that. The reason I started everything that I'm doing as a way to help is because I read a military.com article that had talked about, after World War II, like something like 78% of all small businesses in the United States were owned by veterans. After Vietnam, that fell to like 30%. And for post 9/11, at the time I read the article, it was less than 3%. Which for me just kind of spoke to an education problem. And then I got to confirm that through our mutual friend at a SkillBridge presentation. The first one I did to that SkillBridge, thanks Thomas for the opportunity. It was eye-opening for a lot of service members coming out. They're like, man, hundreds of DMs, just, dude, you opened a door I didn't even know existed with entrepreneurship. And it's like, yeah, you're more than capable of doing all of this. You have all the skill sets. And here's the reason I believe in it so much, is because it's like this never ending mission. It's your baby. You get to do whatever you want with it, structure it, all of that. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be something to do inside of it. So you're creating and replicating that structure that you're used to in the military, because you can't not do that in a business and have it be successful. Right. And so what is your business? I mean, I know what it is, but for those listening, like, what are you doing with Live and Lead Well LLC?
So Live and Lead Well is a leadership development company. And so think seminars, workshops for organizations, EQ. I'm certified on EQ, emotional intelligence, for the 2.0 and also the 360. So if corporate or an organization wants to do a 360 on one of their leaders, like that kind of training as well. And so I'll go out on site and do these workshop seminars catered to the specifics of the organization. So whatever they're looking for, if they're, looking to Leadership 101, they just have some brand new frontline supervisors that need some help, all the way up to their highest levels of leadership, learning about change. And so that's what Live and Lead Well is. But the reason it's named the way it is because through all of my experience in leadership training, teaching it, and then studying it, I've realized the major gap in leadership development training is that we will show you and talk to you and put you in exercises on how to talk to other people and how to show empathy and why you should care and all of this. But I've never been through a training that said, do you know how to talk to yourself? Do you know how to take care of yourself?
Yes. I love this so much. Well, right? The reason I'm so excited about this is because I've got this new philosophy, and it's not new to anybody like yourself who studies this stuff, but like through doing the work and having the conversations, I just kind of just put my own philosophy together. It's like everybody used to tell me it's selfish to take care of yourself first, right? Like military way. If you are the last person you take care of. The opposite side of that, since I've been out and what I do now, is when I take care of myself first, over, I believe, and I could be wrong, but over my spouse, over kids, over everything, when you truly put yourself first, all those other things tend to fall right into place where they should with very little effort.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that on your platform with people who are paying attention, because listen, in the Air Force, one of our core values that we shout from the rooftops is service before self. And I was one of those teachers during, teaching the front line supervisors when this would come up and they'd be like, yeah, but that doesn't really sound like it's good. Does that mean, deny all my own needs for the Air Force? Here's the thing. I could semantics you all day long and tell you what it's supposed to mean, but words matter. And so when someone is shouting from 18 years old to 23, years in, service before self, it is ingrained that should I desire some rest or real, true recuperation, I am being selfish. So to your point, when you break free from that and you realize, and you actually don't just realize it, but you do it, and you start to see the fruits of that, because let me tell you what, Adam, I have never met anybody who made well-being a priority, who came out the other end of that and said, well, I shouldn't have done that. Never. And so when you actually put it into practice, starting with just those 5 minutes a day of you first in silence, that's it. That's all you got to do. Start there. You will start to see how you show up better as every role that you are meant to play in this life. I am a better everything. Mom, wife, friend, leader, business owner.
Everything. You're just a better human.
I'm a better human.
Yeah. Yeah. And adding to that, I advocate for people to stop trying to play in the box society has created and build your own box. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I call it a blueprint. We're on the same page, Adam.
Yeah, I like the term box. I don't know. I'm just a dumb grunt. But, Brandon Jenkins, if you haven't met him, he does something similar with a blueprint too. And he's retiring. I think he might have just retired from the Navy as a pilot. And he's been doing coaching work with finding your blueprint. And he talks about that too. And it's just fun to get to talk to other folks doing similar things in the same space and really realizing I've always known my whole life I don't fit into this box that everybody like. The reason I joined the Army is because college wasn't for me. And then, fast forward 13 years and I'm in college at 30 years old. And I really realized college was kind of designed for people with a little bit of life experience, not people right out of high school, because college was really freaking easy. I was a 4.0 student in college. I was a 2.3 student in high school or whatever, right? And so, I was the guy, particularly when I was in flight school, I was motivated because flying was a dream. But then the gen ed courses were online and they'd get unlocked on Sundays. I'd have all my work done by Tuesday or Wednesday because I value my time. And all the other students are like, how do you have all this work done? It's like, because I have life experience and I value my time. You're going to put this off to the last minute and rush and not do a good job and just to get it done, where is like, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity because they've unlocked it. I'm going to just front load everything so I can go enjoy the things that I want to do on the back end of it. But even in college, I always knew that like getting this job and being told that I'm going to get fired if I go to a VA appointment. And it's like, I can control those, you know what I mean? Like it just didn't sit well with me. And I operated at a loss. I lost like 14 grand last year doing this stuff, right? But I'm happier than I have ever been in my entire life. It's like it doesn't matter to me because I get to do things like this and talk to people like you. I get to coach, those veterans who resonate with my message and just want an hour of my time. And what I find is usually they just want an ear. They just want me to listen, to be able to dump all of this to somebody they know who gets it. And then they come back to me a week later and they're like, dude, you have no idea how much this helped. I've done X, Y, Z, A, B, and C, and I'm so much further along. And like that to me is taking care of myself and rewarding myself, and it's not got money or anything attached to it, but I'm happier.
Yeah, I think I couldn't picture myself. I was open to the idea, and quite honestly, I'll never take anything off the table because I change and evolve and grow, and maybe it's the right culture that I could go work full time. I don't know. But when I was coming out of it, I couldn't foresee myself at that time clocking in and clocking out anymore. I wanted because what had happened, Adam, was I got super clear on my values, something I had never invested interest in my entire career. When I got clear on those values, and one of them was schedule autonomy, creative freedom.
We are the same person right now.
Right?
This is well, because I tell people, in order to have a successful transition, you need to sit with yourself and have the hard conversation. Identify your core beliefs, values, passions, define what success looks like to you, and now you have a roadmap of what you can pursue in life. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, when you define what success looks like to you, you have just created your own roadmap, because now you're not trying to live up to these impossible standards of other people's expectations of success. Success to me is just 100% total control of my time. That's the biggest factor for me. And then as far as monetarily, what does success look like to me? If my wife and I want to go to Europe next week, spend money like a normal couple would on a week-long vacation, I can come back and I can pay the credit card off without ever looking at the bank account. That's not too much to ask. That's easily attainable, definition of success. The hardest part of my success is building something that allows me to have 100% total control of my time. Right? And I hear you saying the same thing. Schedule autonomy is exactly what I'm talking about. And that's a big factor for you.
Have you read or heard of The Psychology of Money?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's on the shelf right up here.
So good, right? So I just finished it like a couple weeks ago. But one of the first things that I read in there was how, and I'm paraphrasing, but how wealthy people are defined. Like, you are wealthy when you have access over your own schedule. Like that, you're rich. Like anybody who can tell you, because you can have $1 million in the bank and be tied and tethered to a corporation and feel like you don't have any freedom of movement. And so you have to define what wealthy, rich, success, what does that mean for you to live a happy life, a joyful life, I should say. Happy is a little more fleeting, joyful is a little more ingrained, right? So what does that mean for you, and how would you define it? So what I tell folks in my seminar is, if I could make you do a homework assignment, it would be for you to sit down with your favorite cup of hot beverage in the morning and write out your vision for your life. Like, be as specific as possible. You know the SMART goal that we all know about? Get rid of MART. Be specific. And it could be anything. And no one's standing over your shoulder looking at it saying that's not possible. It'll show up in here. You just got to listen. Okay, you're trying to help me out. Okay, take a seat. What's the job you want? What's the culture you want to work in? How do you want to have meaning in your life? What relationships do you have? The kind of friends, your hobbies, blah, 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 right? Be as specific as you can, because if you don't bring to the surface what you actually want, how would you even know to write the blueprint?
But Mary, I don't know what I want.
Okay, well, let's start with, let's get quiet. Isn't that the most common question if someone's asked?
100%, 100%.
Yeah, what are you going to do after you retire or you leave the service? And their answer might be, I don't know.
I'm going to go to
And then,
school. I'm going to go to school.
yeah. Or let's just say they're brave enough to say, I don't know. Well, what are you passionate about? I have no idea. Okay. Then the inner insecurity starts bubbling up. I should know what I'm passionate about. I should know what I want. No, you shouldn't. I mean, you've been giving your whole entire mental capacity and white space, if you will, in your head to the military. Who's got time to develop a life vision, right? And so I say to all those people, if you don't know what you want and you don't know what you're passionate about, you are okay and you're in good company. Just start with quieting the noise, listening to what things may come up. One of the questions I put in the book of, like, if you're trying to figure out who you are and what you want, pay attention to when you're supposed to be doing something that has to be done or that you don't necessarily want to do, but you're procrastinating. What are you doing while you're procrastinating? Because if you're looking up vintage autographed guitars, and that's what you look at all the time whenever you have 5 spare minutes, there's something there.
Yeah, something big, right?
Right? Like, maybe there's, I don't know, a site you can build that brings people one-stop shop for vintage guitars. Like, you pay attention to the things that you don't normally pay attention to, and you'll start to emerge.
I love
I'm getting
this.
geeked out.
No, I love this so much. And so I want to spend the last little few minutes that we have here kind of picking apart the TAP program, because it's not a good program at all. Particularly, I have a doctorate psychology, leadership psychology student in front of me. So I'd be, off kilter if I didn't ask certain questions like this. But my limited psychology knowledge, they're priming us in the TAP class by saying, particularly enlisted guys of E6 and below, probably more so than E7 and above, but I'm sure it filters all the way through. But they're saying, you've got this incredible education benefits and you need to go use these benefits to get that degree, right? And then when you get that degree, you're a veteran and everybody's going to want to hire you because you're a veteran. And then they slap you on the ass and they tell you, good luck, congratulations, you're going to be successful. That's priming at its finest, because that's not at all what happens out here. I followed that exact blueprint. I went to flight school and got an AST in professional pilot, went on and got a bachelor's degree in business and psychology at a choose your own adventure school, and ended up in the insurance industry going broke. Like, that's my story, right? And it kind of even more downhill from there. But I wasn't at all successful. I didn't make 6 figures with the bachelor's degree. In fact, I didn't even need the fucking bachelor's degree to get that fucking position, right? So what do you think we should be doing? Because I've got my own theories, and I'd love to share them with you after I hear yours about how we can fix TAP.
Yeah. So keep in mind that what I'm about to say deserves context and nuance and a much longer conversation.
Of course.
But the way that I view it is, TAP is, first of all, I wish I came here with this data because I don't know it. Who initiated Congress to mandate it? Okay. I would be curious to know that, because here's the thing. Yes, it happens while you're still in uniform, but the DoD system doesn't really care to give you the best experience. I mean, that's an opinion.
Well, and you got 3 major organizations involved in this. You got the VA, the DOL, and DOD, right? So already we're off to a bad start.
Okay. So there we go. So I think, first of all, let me say this. I have to give credit to where credit is due. Our Vietnam veterans, and past that, did not, and before that, obviously, did not get any assistance as they were leaving. So the fact that we have something in place is progress. We are making some progress, right? And that's where voices and thoughts like you and I are about to share come in to make it even better, hopefully, right? But I think that, yes, I'm glad that it's in place. I'm glad that it's congressionally mandated and that we're required to go through it. I think that's important. But where I feel it misses the mark, where I feel it misses the mark is it's more of the same. It's more keeping people in the rat race mentality, stressing them out about what they will and will not see, having absolutes in the conversation, which is absurd because everyone's transition is completely unique to themselves. And so there's that. If we went into TAP with a baseline understanding that, listen, everyone's transition will be different. Take what you can and what resonates, go explore that, right? That's important. We don't do that. Now, what I think should change about it, first of all, is I think there needs to be a psychological and emotional investment first. So you have 2 weeks. This is an ideal situation. You have 2 weeks of TAP. The first week, you shut down everything else. You don't worry about the world outside of yourself. Let's talk about what you're about to go through, what you've been through, and let's have a real honest conversation about why this hurts. And then we do set up all those things and we give you tangible tools to walk away from, because the truth is, day 3 of that part of TAP, nothing may hit. 6 months down the road, you may go back and go, oh my God, right? But at least you have the awareness. Let me pause because I can go on forever. But go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so I want everybody to know, this is, other than back and forth in the DMs to set this podcast up, this is the first time Mary and I have had an at-length discussion about this. So what's really uncanny to me is we're basically on the same page. I have this idea with TAP. I've said it earlier in the show, but TAP is a blanket fix for an individual problem. Like, that's not a secret. Just about everything in the military is a blanket fix for an individual problem. However, I look back at my time in the Army, and I don't know how it was in the other branches, but I know if the Army can do this for injured soldiers to set up a warrior transition unit, it wouldn't be that hard for us to set up a just transition unit. At day 366, that is your last day on active duty. You transition over to the transition unit. And my first step was exactly what you had just said. They need to sit down with people like us, like you, who have experience in this, and just get an evaluation from a coach, a counselor, something like that, about where they're at in their journey. And from there, then you can be pointed to all these wonderful resources like Jason Anderson for pre-veteran, or, me, if that's what is going to resonate with you most, or, the benefits classes, because that's what you need right now. Not everybody needs the same things. And for the next, however long it takes you to identify those things, go through those programs for that whole year that you're getting out, I think that fixes transition. I really do, because now you're sitting down with people who have walked a mile in your shoes, you and I, right? We've done this. We know the mistakes that you've made. We're motivated to help you because, I don't know, like, my whole thing is I set out to be the guy I didn't have when I did this. That's like been my thing since day one. What do you think to like my solution? It's like, sounds similar to what you're talking about.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I think I was going to say part of my wish list would be, skill bridge or not, you have 6 months to transition. You don't have to be at your unit. Like, you're saying 365. So that's even better.
Because that's what the reg says, right? The reg says you get 365 days to transition. So let's take advantage of that, because an entire year with a program that is structured appropriately, we will have less senior NCOs neglecting this process, not knowing what they're supposed to get out of this process, or just change the thinking altogether, I think.
Well, I think if we really wanted to address the veteran suicide problem, then these are real viable conversations and solutions. I think what gets in the way is budgetary constraints. I'm saying that as the devil's advocate.
Yeah, okay? Well, I've heard it. I've already heard it.
Because I think it's part of the conversation that those of us that feel this is a viable solution need to be armed with data and research to combat that response. That's what I'm saying. But I think that's the response we get, right? In an ideal situation, though, yeah, I think that's ever more important. I think coaches should be assigned if someone wants it. Not necessarily, yes, therapy if that's what they need to go do, but not everyone needs to see a clinical psychologist. A lot of people need to see a transition coach, a career coach, or coach. Fill in the blank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like somebody to kind of talk through the things they hadn't considered yet. And that's what coaching is. Coaching is not me sitting here telling you what you should do. Coaches is me asking the questions for you to figure that out.
I was going to say, coaching is a lot of me listening to ask you better questions to kind of get you headed in the right direction.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So there's all these. Now I was part of the, the haves and have-nots. I was part of the haves when I was retiring, and it was great because, yes, I'm glad there's a program, but then why doesn't everybody have this program? Like, that's how I felt about it. I was part of a program at transition that I got accepted into that gave me 6 coaching hours with the same coach to guide me through what I wanted to do next. They sent me a book, which is fantastic, called Design Your Life. They sat me through some computer-based training, but it was great. It was about values building and all of these things, right? It was a wonderful program. And I'm glad that it exists. And I know they're a nonprofit, so their funding is limited to what they've deemed who they want to give it to. But why aren't we taking that as a blueprint and saying everyone who's transitioning gets the time and attention? You served your country. Like, you deserve the best foot forward as you leave back into society, right? You take all the great things you've gotten from your military service, and now you bring that to society instead of what we're experiencing, what we're seeing out there.
Well, and it's funny because I get those people that like, you should know better. You shouldn't have the expectation. The military is not in the business of teaching people how to be civilians. They're in the business of teaching people how to defend the nation. And my counter argument to that, coming from Thomas, actually, is, well, you're actually hurting national security by not preparing us to go to the civilians, because the biggest recruiting tool you have is your veterans. And I don't know if you know this or not, but our recruiting numbers are at an all-time low right now because we have an entire generation of children who are old enough to join the military who watched their parents struggle over the last 20 years. So you tell me how this doesn't make sense to institute into our military. They should be in the business of teaching us how to transition back to civilian life so that we become an asset to those people, because right now I don't know that I would give people solid advice for joining the military.
Yeah, yes and yes. And I was doing a leadership development. I was built as a first year of my retirement. I was helping to build a leadership development course. And one of the things I said was, and it was for a military organization, and one of the things I said was, the reason this course is so important is, we've had lots of courses that teach airmen. It was for the Air Force, teach airmen how to be better airmen, but we don't have any courses to teach them how to be better people. And that comment right there that I shared with people who are not of the minds of you and I, don't feel the same way, it was crickets. And I thought, oh, you're not interested in that.
It's because they're brainwashed.
You're not, huh?
They're brainwashed.
Yeah, they're not interested in that. And so when people recant and say, we're the military's in the business of, what did you say? Building.
Just they're not in the business of teaching us how to be civilians. They're in the business of teaching us how to defend the nation.
Correct. So noted. But here's the thing, though, that we realize after the fact, after we're gone, that while we're in, there is a moral contract that gets broken daily. And that, to me, I'll give you an example. That, to me, is the most frustrating and heartbreaking thing about it. Because listen, if I join and you give me all your cards up front and I decide with all those cards that I'm going to stay, I think there's a lot more personal agency in that, and I'll show up as a different person. I won't get so wrapped up into this as my identity, but they want you to do it. They want you to identify 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're on, right? Okay. When I was at the Pentagon, we had released this, memorandum from the top down that said how important self-care was and how important it was to the 4 pillars of wellness. And like, we have a whole training surrounding it, all of this, like push. They got to know how important it is to take care of themselves. There is zero infrastructure to help people do that. Zero infrastructure, meaning there isn't time set aside for it. There isn't clarification on what's going to be evaluated now that you've shown that you can care for yourself. There isn't any kind of incentive, right? And so what are people going to do? It's going to fall on deaf ears, and they're going to continue doing what the system is telling them to do. So you're breaking a moral contract just in that alone. Is you're telling me it's important, yet you're providing no support for me to do it. Therefore, I'm at conflict with myself. What do I choose? Survival.
Yeah. Oh, man. What an awesome conversation, Mary. Tell everybody how they can find you on social media, reach out to you to continue this conversation, because I'm sure we could go for another 2 hours.
I think we can. We might have to have a follow-up. Maybe you'll come on mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
I need to get it back up and running again. But yes, so my website is liveandleadwell.org, but the fastest way to connect with me is probably LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. And so on Mary Polanco, you'll see me on there. And then you can contact through my website's on there. I have a contact button if you ever want to reach out. I'm happy to continue to help in this space wherever I can.
I love it. What's the one thing you want everybody to take away from our conversation today?
If you are a transitioning service member, or if you are transitioning into a major life change milestone, if you will, for yourself, the first and most impactful thing that could help you along your journey is to quiet the noise. Get quiet and start listening to yourself for once. Hear what your inner self is calling you and pulling you to do. And then when you have clarity on that, lean in. Lean in without fear. Lean in knowing that you are fully prepared and you will never, ever be starting over. You're starting with experience and you will be successful based on your own terms. And I wish everyone well.
I love that so much. And just to add one more thing to that, it's going to be extremely uncomfortable. So just brute force your way through the uncomfortability, because the other side is so rewarding. I promise you.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And before we go, I do need to just take a minute, Adam, if you allow me, just to thank you. I think I had a colleague of mine, an old colleague of mine, send me a text message with your post in it. And he said, "This guy and you, same message, different delivery." And I was like, I love it. And so I have been just a fan of you and hearing what you say. Also, as a transitioning service member, I find comfort in it. And I just want to thank you for, doing what you're doing for everybody. So I appreciate you.
Wow. That's really humbling. And I do appreciate it. I just want everybody to not have to go through what I went through. It took me 8.5 years and, rock bottom and ayahuasca to really turn my life around and realize, I think the moral of this story for me is I was just fighting everything about myself and trying to appease everybody else. And to me, that's like the biggest takeaway in transition is do everything for yourself. Don't do it for anybody else, not your wife, not your kids, not your husband, not your parents, not your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. It has to be for yourself. And I do understand that that's counterintuitive. It goes against everything you were taught your entire career and probably your entire life. Let's be honest. It is the way that it needs to be, and it's not selfish. It's actually probably the most unselfish thing you can do because it makes you a better person and makes everybody else around you better too. Mary, thank you so much for doing this. I would love to do a round 2 with you. We could dive more into it, like way less formal, more less interview style, more conversational. I just appreciate it. I'm so glad Thomas forced me to reach out to you and do this. And I really just appreciate it. And thank you so much for doing this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, I created a free community. It's a member-driven community. I don't drive engagement in there. You do. To avoid shitty Facebook groups where you're going to get bullied, come to my community. There's people, in it, on the other side of it, going through it, building businesses, developing careers, whatever, that can give you sound advice and their kind of take on what you might be going through. So please, leverage that. I am all the time collecting more resources, different technologies to heal wounds and emotional health and all of that. So please leverage that community for what it is. And we'll see you next week with another awesome episode. Take care, everybody. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.